Hey folks, this is Kelani. I've seen quite a few topics and videos crop up here, there and everywhere about the amount of content we're getting in Battle for Azeroth. It's not been all that uncommon for people to compare BFA to Warlords of Draenor, the Doomsayers even being so bold as to say that Battle for Azeroth is going to be Warlords of Draenor all over again. WoD 2.0. That worries me a little bit. Are things really that bad? Do we not have enough substance to keep players interested until the first major patch? I've been playing the beta for a long while now, and honestly I've been excited for every build. I'm still very excited for everything to go live, so I can actually put some effort into the new content without spoiling absolutely everything for myself. There's a huge difference when it's your live character you're playing and what you're doing actually matters and carries over, but I hadn't really stopped to consider if we have enough content. I personally haven't run out of things to do, and that's with me actively avoiding certain things because I either don't want to spend time on that during a beta, or I want that experience to be fresh when the game actually launches. So let's break things down a little bit to ask and try and answer, do we have enough content in Battle for Azeroth? Now, remember that we're not talking about a patch here. This is an entire new expansion, lots of new zones, a new leveling experience, and a whole reset to the content we'll be doing at max level. New dungeons, new raids, all that good stuff. I'll draw some comparisons to Legion in some instances to give you an idea of what we got for what was widely considered one of the best expansions in World of Warcraft history. If Legion had enough stuff and BFA is offering up the same amount or more, then we should be good to go, right? Let's kick off things with the leveling experience, because this one is kind of odd. Each faction starts on their own island, which consists of 3 zones. Those 3 zones will take you all the way to max level. So for leveling, you essentially have 3 zones, which might come as a bit of a shock to most people. Only 3 zones? Not really much to work with there. Well, each zone has several storylines which you can progress through to tell the overarching story of why the Horde or the Alliance is present in these areas and what they hope to accomplish. Perhaps the most interesting part of Battle for Azeroth leveling is that while you only have 3 zones to get through, those zones are entirely separate for the Horde and the Alliance. Usually each faction would either end up starting at a different location and end up completing the same quests for the most part, or in the case of Legion we all had the exact same quest lines throughout the 4 zones of the Broken Isles. Suramar had nothing to do with leveling up, and neither did the Broken Shore. So altogether, Legion only had 4 zones worth of quests, while Battle for Azeroth has 3 zones for each faction. You might not care, but if you leveled up both Alliance and a Horde character, you'd get 6 zones worth of story and quests, a little bit more than we had in Legion. Obviously, not everyone is going to do that, but I really like the fact that each faction has its own story, its own reasons for being on their islands with their own problems to fix. The whole faction conflict wouldn't really have been very exciting if we were all running around together anyways. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have access to the other zones, which leads me to the war campaign. In Legion we had the class hall campaigns, which took you through what each class was contributing to the war effort against the Legion. Well, we don't have class halls in Battle for Azeroth, everything seems more faction focused, so we have the war campaigns. These basically tell the story of the Horde vs Alliance conflict. The Horde side takes you through building up settlements and bases on the Alliance island of Kul'Tiras, while the Alliance side has you set up the same kind of deal on the Horde island of Zandalar. So as you progress through your war campaign, which you can do while you're leveling up, you unlock access to the other island for a total of 6 zones. The enemy island doesn't really have the same kind of story quest as your own island zones. You won't really be able to do any meaningful leveling there, but it will become important later on. As you progress through the war campaign, you'll work with a specific faction, either the Honorbound or the 7th Legion, to intercept, investigate, and just downright annoy the opposite faction. You'll learn a few pieces of interesting information towards the end. This is basically the story of the expansion. This is probably what will be expanded upon in future patches, and what leads to an all-out war, or the 2 factions coming together again to fight against a common foe. However that's going to happen, it will probably be explained in the war campaigns. Partway through the leveling experience, you will also be able to unlock a new form of content, the Island Expeditions. These are 3-man open role scenarios. You can join up with any combination of classes and roles you want, and the goal is to run around a random island to gather up a certain amount of Azerite before the opposite faction. You start off with just normal difficulty, but when you reach max level you can also queue into Heroic, Mythic and PvP islands. All modes except the PvP mode pit your team against the new smart NPCs, who will do a lot more than just cast spells into your face. They should prove to be quite a challenge on Mythic difficulty, which could be a lot of fun. If you want to turn the islands into a new battleground, the PvP option pits you against actual players, and right now islands are shaping up to be a lot of fun and quite rewarding. They award a good amount of artifact power, used to power your new artifact, the Heart of Azeroth, and they also reward a whole bunch of weapons, toys, pets, mounts, and achievements. They're a treasure trove of goodies, and will probably keep you pretty occupied if you're hunting for anything that specifically comes from Island Expeditions. But that's not the only type of new content we're getting in Battle for Azeroth. We also have Warfront. You can only join up for Warfront at max level and only after getting partway through your war campaign, but there are a lot more involved than we initially thought. Warfronts are on a 4-stage cycle where the Horde and Alliance take turns fighting over control of the Arathi Highlands. There's an initial contribution stage where you can contribute all sorts of goodies from every profession, and when the contribution reaches 100%, a Warfront stage where the Warfront is actually available for one faction opens up. Then it flips over to the other faction where they have a contribution stage and then they get to play in the Warfront after that's reached 100%. It's really interesting that we swap not only control over the Warfront's area, but control over the Warfront's content itself. Only one faction can play the Warfront at a time, which takes me back to some of the old world PvP objectives from the Burning Crusade, where the factions fought over control of spires and towers for a zone-wide buff. Despite what you might be thinking, Warfronts are actually solely PvE content right now. There's no PvP involved whatsoever in these stages, and the Warfronts will pit you against an army of NPCs. But that doesn't mean it's not fun. If you ever wanted to play Warcraft 3 in World of Warcraft, this is probably the closest you're ever going to get. You gather resources to build buildings, recruit troops, upgrade everything, and eventually push forward to take down the enemy citadel. It is a lot of fun, but might end up getting a little stale much faster than the island expeditions, which are random every time you queue up. Warfronts also give you access to a newly updated Arathi Highlands where you can pick up quests, hunt down rare monsters, and even take down a world boss. So you have some open world content to go along with the instanced Warfront itself. So there's some extra content here that we haven't experienced before, but there's also a whole bunch more of what you would typically expect from endgame content in World of Warcraft. We have a whole new round of world quests to keep you busy for the first few weeks of launch. They're working more or less the same way as Legion, so if you played around with world quests already, you should know what to expect. You can run around the world, complete quests at max level for a variety of rewards: gold, artifact power, gear, resources, pretty much anything you could want at max level. The daily emissaries are also returning with their rewards streamlined. A lot of folks might not think world quests really count as content, but they'll definitely be keeping me occupied for the first few weeks for sure. They're also probably the easiest or fastest way to gain reputation with the new expansion's reputations, which means even more rewards. Each faction has 1 rep for each zone, 1 rep for the enemy island, as well as 2 neutral reps of the Tortollan and the Champions of Azeroth. That's 6 new reputations total to gain favour with for mounts, gear, toys, all the usual stuff. Then we also have all new dungeons to explore and plunder, and seeing as leveling works a little weirdly, so do the dungeons. Each faction gains access to 3 dungeons from level 110 and 1 more at level 115. These dungeons are faction specific, so the Horde can head into Atal Dazar, the Temple of Seth Thrallis, and the Underrot right away, and at level 115 they can also enter the Motherlode. The Alliance can enter the Freehold, the Shrine of the Storm, and Waycrest Manor from level 110 and gain access to Tol Dagor at level 115. So 4 dungeons each while leveling, and then when you get to max level, the opposite faction's dungeons become available to double your dungeons to 8 total. There's also 2 mythic-only dungeons, King's Rest and the Siege of Borealis, so when you get enough gear to venture into those dungeons, you'll have a max of 10 dungeons. 2 mythic-only dungeons reminds me of Court of Stars and the Archway, which had heroic modes added on later on for the Dungeon Finder, so I guess we can expect that to happen with these dungeons as well. Legion also launched with 10 dungeons total, so maybe that's the target the dev team plans to hit for expansion releases. It seemed to work out quite nicely for Legion. We had plenty of variety, especially when Mythic Plus came around. Mythic Plus isn't going anywhere, so dungeons should stay relevant throughout the entire expansion, so I'm thankful we have a variety of dungeons. Hopefully we'll have some more come our way as the expansion unfolds. Then of course we have a new raid. We're starting off with just the one, Ul'Dir. This raid comes with 8 bosses and sets the stage for our raiding experience in Battle for Azeroth. We'll venture through an abandoned Titan facility, destroying everything in our way, to eventually come face to face with an old god turned blood god experiment, G'huun. Hopefully these bosses give us a lot of entertainment because they're the only ones we'll be getting until the next raid comes out. We're not too sure when that's going to happen, or really what kind of raid it could be, or who we'll be fighting. We actually don't know anything about the future of Battle for Azeroth at all, which is kind of weird. We knew so many little details about where Legion was headed and who we would end up fighting, but BFA is all a mystery. That's a little concerning, but also really exciting. I just hope the dev team has a plan to keep the content flowing like they did during Legion. To add to the 8 raid bosses inside Ul'Dir, there's also 7 world bosses scattered around for that extra chance at loot each week. So that's what you can expect as far as typical expansion content goes, but there's also new systems and updates to older systems to keep everything chugging along smoothly, as well as providing some choice on how you want to play. The new world mode option opens up your gameplay to world PvP while providing some decent bonuses. You can level faster and gain extra rewards from world quests, but anyone you come across will also be playing with war mode on. The opposite faction can attack you at any time, so be careful. There's new followers and missions which aren't tied anywhere near as closely to the story of the expansion, so if you want to skip over them you can, but if that's something you enjoy, then have at it. There's new raw materials and crafting recipes for professions as well, so if you want to be the king of trade and markets, you can whip up all manner of cool new stuff in BFA. Right now I can't really see where there's a lack of content, and everything I've played so far I've enjoyed thoroughly. It seems like we should have enough to tide us over until the next patch. Now if the patches are few and far between, like what we had in Warlords of Draenor, I could see there being an issue later on down the line. That was the major problem with Warlords. They had a pretty decent launch, we had quite a few things to do, but we went far too long without any meaningful updates. Fingers crossed that doesn't happen in Battle for Azeroth. Legion was so consistent that I just can't see the dev team dropping the ball that badly. If they do, oh boy, that's going to be one heck of a fall from grace, but for now, I'm happy with what we have. If there's one thing I would say is weaker than Legion in my eyes, it's the new artifact system. Our artifact in Legion provided a real sense of personal character progression, mainly because it was glued to our hands for the entire expansion, but you collected artifact power and progressed through various quests to unlock traits, abilities, and transmogs. The Heart of Azeroth artifact doesn't really do that. Sure, we collect AP, which levels up the heart, but the traits are actually tied to Azerite armor. You can unlock 3 or 4 traits in each piece of armor, and you can equip 3 pieces, 1 for your head, 1 for your shoulder, and 1 for your chest slot. I think overall the Azerite armor works pretty well, and the Heart of Azeroth actually increases in item level as you put more AP into it, meaning there is some personal progression to be made, but if you put the two systems side by side, I think Legion artifacts had a lot more going for them. But hey, at least we have some traits and abilities to shoot for, and I'm actually really excited to be able to get weapons as drops again, so a few ups, a few downs. A new artifact, a new raid, 10 dungeons, 6 reputations, plenty of world quests, Warfronts, island expeditions, a story in the war campaign, and 3 zones to level through for each faction, which tell a unique story, with 3 more zones to explore and plunder after you unlock them later. Not too shabby from where I'm sitting, definitely enough content for a decent launch. The main concern should be, will we have enough content throughout the lifespan of Battle for Azeroth, because that's going to be the deciding factor on whether or not this expansion ends up being another Legion or another Warlords. But what do you think? Do we have enough content in your eyes? If not, what's missing? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. If you want to hop on that train, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.